everybody, and welcome to episode 3 of Let's Go Sew, Sewing for Beginners. I'm Erica.
And I'm Caitlyn.
And today we're going to be cutting our fabric. Now before we start, we want to mention that you frequently hear the term finished in sewing. Caitlyn, talk us through finished and unfinished.
Okay. So unfinished is when you do your cut size.
Okay.
So you cut it to, generally we use 1/4 of an inch on a project. Some projects use 1/2 an inch, but that would be added to your finished size. So this is a 2.5 inch square.
Okay.
Because we're going to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So that would be a 1/4 inch added to our finished size. So this is the finished size, which is a 2 inch.
So once it's sewn into your project on all the sides, that's your finished size.
Correct.
Perfect. All right. And most patterns have that factored into the cutting requirements. You just need to cut what's listed. And this is true for the pattern in this project. So let's go ahead and grab the paper pamphlet that comes in with your kit and look on the back. There are the cutting instructions for each mug mat design. Now these measurements are exactly the size that we need to cut. You don't need to add anything to them. On our last episode, we prepared our fabric for cutting. So let's get out those cutting tools. Caitlyn, what do we need?
We need our ruler,
okay,
our rotary cutter, and our rotary mat.
Okay, so we've laid our mat down in front of us, right?
Yes, we have it. I generally, because I'm a right-handed person, have the 0 to my right.
Okay.
That's just a preference. I know sometimes, we don't really use this as
Sure.
often. We mainly use our ruler.
Right. You want to predominantly rely on your ruler as much as possible because typically that's your most accurate.
Yes, but later on when we talk about rough cutting, that's kind of why I have this to my side.
Okay.
All right, so then we're going to take our fabric. This has already been folded salvage to salvage, but you're going to want to do that so that it fits on your mat. Now, if you have a smaller mat than we do, you do another fold like this, and you want to make sure that this is nice and flat and it's not wonky like this.
Oh yes, that's going to be key.
Yes, because then you'll have,
a mountain in the middle.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Or as I like to call it, a dipsy doodle.
So since we have a wider mat, we're going to just fold it once because then that causes less of imperfections if we need it.
And that's easier for everybody to see too.
Yes. So then what you're going to start off with is a straight 90 degrees so that you have a straight cut.
Okay.
Up the, because some of them, when you get them off the bolts, they're not
right.
straight on this side.
Right. Okay.
So what we're going to do is we're going to lay our ruler on here so that the horizontal lines line up on this fold.
Okay.
And we want to make sure that this fabric there's enough on both sides to cut both sides.
Right.
You don't want to have one straight side and then one not.
Right, we're creating a nice starting place for us.
Yes, so and then I have the ruler to my left side because that is my non-dominant hand, which is what you're going to hold the ruler with.
Okay.
And cut with your dominant hand.
Okay.
So you're going to hold it nice and tight so it doesn't wiggle.
Okay.
And we're going to take your rotary cutter, whatever one you have, turn it into the blade out position.
Okay.
And you're going to put it up tight against the ruler.
Uh-huh.
And you're going to just roll it across the ruler.
Perfect. Okay, so now we know we've got a good flat edge. And if there's a lot of strings, you can run your blade across it again. But periodically, you're going to need to change that blade out as well.
Yes.
All right, now our project we're making uses 2.5 inch strips. So we want to start by cutting those 2.5 inch strips, Caitlyn.
Yes, and you're going to actually use your ruler to cut the width of it. So we don't want to cut into our 2.5 inch strips, so we don't want to move it over and cut the 2.5 inch strips.
Okay.
So we were going to want to line up this line. To do that, you can either turn your mat or turn your fabric, just making sure that none of the layers are moved.
Okay.
And we're going to turn it so it's this side.
Right.
And we're going to line up our, we're going to go 2.5 inches in, so 1, 2.5.
Okay.
And we're going to line up the 2.5 inch cut edge that we cut.
Okay.
So now we're gonna
There we
have
go.
2.5-inch strips. So then you do the same exact thing. You go here and you roll your rotary cutter right across. All right, now we have a 2.5-inch strip.
There you go. And this is going to be the same process for making rectangles, right?
Yes, so you generally start with strips first and then you subcut into rectangles. So if we need a 2.5-inch strip and then a length of 4.5 or whatever length that we're working with, you're gonna take your strip and you're gonna do the same thing. You're gonna wanna do another 90 here.
Okay.
So what you do is you take your ruler and you measure, or you line up the horizontals again. And then you want to do the cut to make the 90.
Okay.
And then you take it and flip it over. And then we're going to do a 4.5 inch. So then you take the 4.5-inch mark and
Okay.
you line that up, and
Line that
also
up.
make sure that your horizontals to keep a 90-degree.
Right.
And then you do one more cut. And you have a 4.5.
That is so slick. Okay. So we've done the same process to make those rectangles. So what if your measurement is larger than your ruler? Well, tell us about that.
Yes, you usually just buy a bigger ruler to fit the size you need.
Okay.
But if you are doing cutting pieces for backing or want to do some rough cutting for like the Go system,
Okay.
you can use the grid of your mat.
Okay.
So it works very similarly to the ruler. You make sure that you have your fabric folded in half. So then you put your fabric on the horizontal line. So this is your fold of your fabric. And then generally,
You go ahead and you're going to line that up with your 0.
yes.
Okay.
So then you take your edge of your ruler and you line it up on the mark, the
Okay.
0 mark. And you just cut to make your 90-degree. And then say we're working with a 12-inch cut. So we would want to go over to the 12-inch then,
Okay.
and we rough cut it here.
And then you just line it up with the 12.
Yes.
So there's different ways of doing it.
Do you want me to-
Okay. And then we also talked about, you mentioned rough cutting.
Yes.
So you can use that grid for rough cutting. Example, like you said, if you needed it 12.5 by maybe 15.5.
Yes.
You could cut that 12.5
And then
turn
rotate.
it.
Yep.
Cut the 15.5. Okay. So anytime you're using that ruler, gently lift it up so the fabric doesn't move. Place it back down on that mark. You're all good to go. All right. Now, like we mentioned earlier, you might not want to use the grid markings on your mat if you need really precise cuts, but they're great for cutting yardage into smaller chunks or for working with your backing fabric as well. Now, if you are asking to yourself right about now, what are those angled lines for on the ruler and on the mat? Well, Caitlyn's going to tell you about that.
Yes. So you can cut more complicated cuts like hexagons, parallelograms, diamonds, and stuff like that. But that is more of an advanced cuts. We are not going to do that for our project. And I would recommend being more comfortable with your ruler before diving into those.
I think that's a very good suggestion, quilters. Now, in our tools and supplies episode, we mentioned the Go cutting system, which is a tool that makes fabric cutting faster, easier, and more accurate. And our project can be cut using the Go strip cutter 2.5-inch die, and this is actually specified in the supply list. So we want to go over a couple of die basics with you. If you are looking for a more in-depth look at the Go fabric cutting system, you can find lots of helpful blogs, lots of videos on AccuQuilt.com, and don't forget AccuQuilt has a great YouTube channel as well that is full of videos. So first, here's the die. Now, between the foam, we've got some blades that are going to cut your fabric to the size that they are on the die. So this die and all of our dies are going to cut up to 6 layers of 100% quilting cotton. And you can see the blades are going to run here, here, and here. we have no crosswise blades on our strip dies. And that's important because of lengthwise grain,
Yes.
right? Okay, so we want to go ahead and measure from blade to blade on here. And if we measure that, we're going to say we've got two 2.5-inch strips. We're going to say this is 5 inches. We just need to rough cut a 1/4 inch over on either side. That would give us 5.5-inch width strips of fabric, right?
Which is what you would, if you are more comfortable with the mat at first
Sure.
for rough cutting, you can use that. And then this is the fold of our fabric, which we're going to want to line up on this line.
Right, so this is going to be just the same as using the line on the mat or your ruler to make sure that it's all squared up. And we've got that on there. Now what we need to do is cover it with a cutting mat. And this is a die cutting mat, right? And nothing's going to happen unless the blade is covered with both fabric and the mat. And then we're going to use our Go Me fabric cutter, right?
All right, so you just simply put the die board on the tray, and you have your mat on top, and you're going to want to roll it through.
Here you go. All right, so we're going to build up some static on our mat as this goes through the cutter. We're just going to give it a little love. We're going to slide that mat off, and there you see there's our little bit of scrap. We've got our 2 perfectly cut strips, and we could have cut 6 in that same amount of time.
Correct.
That is pretty cool. So before we go any further, I just want to point out real quick, majority of Go dies have crosswise blades on them. And when that comes into play, you need to feed your fabric through with the lengthwise grain parallel to the lengthwise blades on the die. That's going to prevent the fabric from stretching and causing any inaccurate cuts. Strip cutters are the exception because there are no crosswise blades. You can lay your fabric on it any way you want to. You can even cut bias cuts, but that's way more advanced. We'll talk about that later. Now, all that is types of cuts that you'll need for this project. Now you know how to cut. We're going to go ahead and let you cut all the pieces that you need for this project using whatever system you prefer and feel more comfortable with. Again, use the cutting instructions included in your June Taylor kit. It also might be helpful to group your pieces together for each different mug mat, right?
Yes.
Okay. You can also take a little piece of paper and pin it with a number to help you remember which piece is which. We will not be looking at these pieces again until our last episode. So we will let you get to work, and we will see you back for our next episode when we're going to take a look at our sewing machine.
Happy sewing.